World bosses in World of Warcraft are nothing new. We've seen huge raid groups battling over tags for different raid bosses as far back as 2004. The thing that changes them slightly in Cataclysm is there's actually one in every zone, and you might not have even heard of them. They all drop 359 epic gear, which, for getting pre-raid bis in Phase 1 of Cataclysm, these are going to be incredibly important. All of them drop one unique epic 359 item each, as well as a shared table of other 359 epic gear. That's not all though, they even drop some very good enchanting recipes, some very good jewel crafting cuts, but the actual loot table of 359 epics they drop is pretty big. Whilst we don't know exactly in Classic Cataclysm what their spawn time is going to be like, historically you could only have 2 of the 5 up at any one time, and they was on around a 72-hour spawn timer. So taking Gar for example in Mount Hyjal, from the moment he dies, 72 hours later, he could pop back up, or it could be one of the other ones in one of the other 4 zones. Now, I don't want you to confuse these with things like the dragon that's in Deepholm, which drops a mount, or even Poseidus in Vash that drops a mount as well. These are completely different. These originally would require anything from 10 to 15 players to kill, but they did get nerfed quite heavily, but also at the same time the loot got buffed. So these originally dropped 346 blue gear, before they was increased to 359 epic gear. They also had their health slashed massively from around 30 million down to 12 million, so these are quite comfortably 3-4 manned, I would say, with especially the way we play today, but you're definitely going to want a tank, a healer, and at least 1 DPS, but honestly, if you can get a group of 5 here, you're going to be laughing. Now, it's worth noting, like I said at the start, before 4.1, these were dropping the blue 346 items. We're in 4.4, so that's post 4.1, so these should absolutely be dropping the 359 items. And I've even checked in-game by linking the item ID, and they are actually in the game files, so I would kind of assume that we are going to be getting the epic versions. And also, just to double check, I did go on the beta vendors, which were put in for the raid testing, and these items are actually available on the vendor in their epic form. Rather than talking about every single item they drop, I'm just going to focus on the one unique item they drop. So for example, Julak Doom in Twilight Highlands, which can be found around here, can drop a very strong one-handed dagger for casters. Now you may be tempted to try and kite the boss over to a town or do it solo, and the only class that will probably be able to comfortably do it solo would be something like a Blood DK, but probably not until you've got half decent gear. The boss itself is not too difficult though. He leaves black pools on the ground, just move out of them. He's got eye beams that follow someone, a little bit like Cologarm from Ulduar. Just move away. He'll also do mind controls on people. The easiest way to deal with this is just to take them under 90% health. So don't just full on nuke them, just get them under 90%. Jobs are good un. And he also does a conal shockwave, and this does a lot of damage. So obviously, as the tank, just make sure you're facing it away. You should actually be able to avoid it as a tank as well. When the shockwave's coming in, just step out of the cone and then back in. But honestly, just stand there and take it. Use a cooldown if you need to. But just deal with the mechanics and you should get the dagger plus 1 other BOE epic and a recipe as well. Again, until I've actually killed these myself, which I of course haven't on the beta, I can't be 100% on how much loot's going to drop, but historically it would have been the unique item that the boss drops, which in this case is the dagger, 1 other BOE epic, and a recipe. Moving over to Oldham, we've got Akmahat. Now, he spawns in a single location, so should be quite easy just to have an alt logged out there and check every now and again to see if he's available. But his unique epic that he drops is the Belt of 1,000 Gaping Mouths. Again, the rest of the loot that comes from him is shared across all the bosses, and just for clarity, they're 359 world epics. Technically, these can drop from anything in dungeons, out on level 85s in the open world, or in raids, but they're guaranteed from these rares. Again, like the last boss and all of these, as many people as you can muster up, but you want at least a tanker, healer, and a couple of DPS. He's only got a few abilities. He does Fury of the Sands, which you'll quite clearly see on the floor, just don't stand in them. He'll also do Sands of Time at a random player. Now, it's a magical effect, so this is like the reason you really want a healer in the group, because if you're doing it with 5 people, having your haste reduced massively is obviously not going to be good, so you want Dispel him. He also does Shockwave on the tank, so just have it faced away. And when he casts Stone Mantle, he's going to get a shield that just needs to be nuked down, because the longer the shield's up, the more damage he's going to be dealing. So when the shield goes up from Stone Mantle, that's the time to just pop cooldowns and nuke through the shield. If you use TomTom, I did actually find an old Wowhead comment as well, which has got a waypoint to all of these bosses, so if you want that, I'll put it in a link in the description. Now next up over in Vash, you're going to find Mobus. Now Mobus is a really interesting one because he drops something that every Feral Druid is going to want, especially when we're talking pre-raid, because there's going to be nothing close to it you can get. Now Mobus has only got a few abilities. He's got a Ram, which is a cleave ability that hits for a decent amount on the tank. It also does a knockback as well, so just keep it facing away. He also does Algae, which is just a cloud of toxic algae on a random person. You just all move away from it, simple as that. And then he does Wake, which is a 5-second cast, so when you see it casted, just move away or swim down, whatever, just get away from the boss, because it's only within around a 25-yard radius, and he's going to do about 11k damage every 2 seconds to anyone who gets hit. So just move away. As soon as the weight goes off, move back in. It's as easy as that. It's actually probably the easiest one out of all 5, I would say. And then we've got a very familiar one being Gar, which you'll know from Molten Core. Now he drops a plate belt, which is Gar's reinforced girdle of memories. Now you'll see him surrounded by adds. You should be able to pull these adds one at a time and just kill them before actually encountering the boss. And quite honestly, there's not really that much going on. He does a magma explosion, which everyone just needs to run out when it's going off. It's got like a 4-second cast time, so you get plenty of time to move away. Once it's finished, move back in. He does magma shackles that you're going to need to dispel off both tanks and melee as a priority, because if they've got magma shackles, when the explosion's going off, it's going to be very hard for them to get out. And then he does his classic anti-magic pulse, which is just dispelling magic effects on everyone. Honestly, that's it. As long as you can clear the adds one at a time before you go in, just nuke the boss, move out for magma explosion, dispel people who are being slowed, and kill the boss. Which finally leaves us with Zarona, which is a dragon that flies around in Deepholm. Zarona drops some Mal gloves, as well as everything else that you'd expect on the loot list across all of these bosses. Now this one's quite annoying because you do need to find somewhere first to actually be able to pull the boss, because she flies around up the top and you're going to want to land somewhere safe and not lose the tag. This is fairly tank and spank. There's only one minor mechanic that you need to worry about, and that mechanic's called Unleash Magic. Now every now and again she's going to do a massive amount of damage to everybody and you will all die. But the way you counter this is there'll be like bubbles on the floor. These are called Twilight Zones, so you stand in the Twilight Zone and it reduces magic damage taken by 75%. But when Unleash Magic's going off, everybody needs to be stood in a Twilight Zone. Ideally, you're going to want 2 different placed Twilight Zones, one for the tank to stand in and one for everybody else to stand in, because in typical dragon style, she does a Twilight Breath, which does shadow damage in a cone in front of her. So obviously you don't all want to be stood in there, and then she does a Breath straight after the big Unleash Magic, and you all take loads of damage. So the Twilight Zone should spawn like every 30 seconds, and Unleash Magic should come in like once a minute, so you should comfortably be able to have 2 differently placed magic zones at all times during the fight. Ultimately, not a lot to this one either, just kill the boss and loot it. And they're all the world bosses of Cataclysm. They're not really world bosses in terms of like big 40-man epic raids, but they're pretty epic in the fact that they're challenging 5-man heroic type bosses, if you like. So if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.